Welcome. I think you're going to love this topic today in this webcast, Beyond Fasting. Oh, by the way, stay tuned for my book, Beyond Fasting. So you get a little preview today of my book, Beyond Fasting. And okay, look, I'm going to start off with this right here. If you're going to run a marathon, would you train for it or would you just show up and run it? Well, you might do that, but let me ask a different question. What would your results be? Yeah, pretty pathetic, right? Okay, or you probably won't even finish, right? So the point I'm making is, of course, you would train to get a great result from a marathon or any race for that matter, right? Well, fasting, no different. We have to get our bodies ready for something as fasting. Now, look, in the old days, maybe not, right? People were healthy. They were forced into times of fasting continually. Our DNA is set up for fasting. Every culture fasts. Matter of fact, every religious group on the planet disagrees with just about everything, even prayer, but they agree on just one thing, fasting. Yep, every religious group, they agree on fasting. That's it. So it's been the oldest healing modality ever, and I'm going to start with this. I'm going to take you through basically steps to walk somebody through how they have the most successful and easy fast and obtain the maximum results that I'm going to talk about right now. Meaning that if you just fast, rarely will you get all of these incredible results that study after study shows. So we're going to train, and I'm going to teach you how to train and how to train your patients to a fast. And I'm also going to talk about some of the products, systemic products, that can make this fast more successful and easier. So great conversation today. And this is something that I believe every one of you need in your own life. And I believe you need in your practice to get people well today. The benefits of fasting. And if I start here, the word autophagy was won by a 2016, it was the 2016 Nobel Prize, was won by a Japanese gentleman. And on this word autophagy. So most of you, I think, have heard of it, but for those of you who haven't, let's talk about what it is. Autophagy means the body is literally so smart that in a time where it's not eating or it's in a really low caloric state, to get more protein, to keep the body healing, to get more energy that it needs to survive, it will literally eat all of your bad cells and debris that it knows it doesn't need, and it can use it for energy. It's so smart that it leaves all your good tissue alone and will eat the bad cells. Well, why is that important? Because bad cells create bad behavior in your body, right? Bad cells lead to cancer cells. Bad cells lead to cells that don't use fat for energy and just crave sugar, and they throw you off every diet, and they keep you fat even on the perfect diet because these cells are just programmed to use sugar only. Remember, your cells can only use sugar or fat. Many, many cells in the body are just stuck as sugar burners. Guess what? During autophagy, your body starts getting rid of those ones, and it keeps the ones that are able to use fat. That sounds really good because that sounds like someone who's really healthy and able to fat adapt when they're not eating. Someone who stays lean, someone who has energy all day, doesn't have brain fog. Right. We want more of those cells. So via this autophagy, we can get rid of the bad ones and keep the good ones. You've probably heard me say this, but I'm going to make you say it with me. Bad cells don't adapt. Say it. Bad cells don't adapt. I think you said it. So how do we force adaptation? We fast in some fashion or another. I'm going to talk to you about different fasting options as well through this training that we're going to do. But yes, bad cells don't adapt. And when you go without food or very low quantities of food and protein, we force the body into this, I have to adapt. The bad ones don't adapt, and your body will eat them up and use them as energy. And that's called autophagy. Okay, here's the big benefit, actually. Guess what else happens? Your body raises up stem cells to replace those lost cells. So think of it in terms just of your immune system. I mean, it will replace better muscle cells. So that's why people that need to gain weight can benefit from fasting, because they get rid of the bad muscle cells that aren't recovering. My wife, after each fast, was getting more and more muscular, and we've seen that with patients as well. And there's many reasons for that, not just the autophagy. There's a hormone optimization that occurs after each fast. So I'm a believer in not just one fast, I'm a believer in multiple fasts. And I'll talk about that too, because there's a time to do more fasting with people who have different conditions. So, but we want to prepare ourselves into this state. Okay, so I was talking about, let's look at the immune cells as an example. Years ago, I actually studied fasting. It was back in the early 90s, and I was very into it. And I learned it all, I believe, for a time as this, because I was the only guy into fasting, it seemed like. And then I shelved it for a long time, only to bring it back out with the resurgence of struggling with autoimmune conditions. But here's why it works for autoimmune, food allergies, and a lot of other different inflammatory problems. So back then, one of the criticisms of fasting was we see this massive drop in white blood cells. So it's bad for your immune system and blah, blah, blah. People with immune compromise shouldn't fast. And we heard all those things. And all our answer is, well, that may be true, but it works. And people's immune systems seem to get better, not worse. But scientifically, we didn't have an answer. Today we do. Walter Longo is an Italian researcher that showed what's happening. So what happens is, through this autophagy process, the body is smart enough to get rid of all of these hyperactive old immune cells. And so we see that drop because the body's getting rid of these hyperactive cells that drive autoimmune and food allergies and allergies, et cetera, and just chronic inflammation for that matter. But what happens next that he showed and proved is that we have an elevation of the stem cells to replace those immune cells. So that's great, because now we have these naive cells that aren't running around creating trouble and mischief. That's why we see a downregulation of autoimmune and an upregulation of good immunity. So that's one of the main benefits of fasting. And by the way, that autophagy, the reason we do 5-day fasts, and that's what we're going to train up to as a 5-day fast 6 weeks from now, okay? And the reason we do the 5 days is because day 4, we see the maximum amount of autophagy occurring, because by then the body's super fat adapted, and this autophagy is at its high point. Well, guess what happens day 5? We see a maximum result of the stem cells creating and replacing them. So that's why we go 5 days. We pick up that maximum on the autophagy and then on the stem cells. Pretty cool. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get some autophagy even during a daily fast, 15 to 24 hours. You still get some autophagy, but to hit that big autophagy, we have to go longer in a fast. And by the way, there's a lot of the benefits that I'm going to talk about next don't occur until after that day 3, because typically it takes people 3 days to really start tapping in to their fat, unless you're going to follow this training up to the fast that I'm going to talk about today. All right, so because then you start getting this autophagy. Actually, day 1, it's some high levels. Day 2, you even see high stem cell day 2 of a fast, as long as you go into this fast very fat adapted. So that brings me to week 1. So this is your first week lesson on how to go beyond the fast and maximize the results. Oh, before I get there, I didn't tell you the other benefits of the fast. Okay, so we read about all these benefits of ketones and how ketones can change the brain, neurodegenerative conditions, autism, et cetera. But it's really high ketones, even cancer. It's very high ketones when you look at the study. The only real way to get there is times of fasting, whether it's, again, pure water or a partial fast, or a fasting mimicking diet, which I'm going to talk about. But regardless, we have to do some sort of fasting to see these super high ketones that absolutely, no doubt, have an effect on the brain, as well as the gut too, by the way. So yes, you can go into ketosis and get high ketones, but we need higher levels to see the big healing. You get that with fasting. So that's another benefit. I love this one. It's called energy diversion. So meaning that your body in a fasting state has so much extra energy. Literally, it goes, okay, what am I going to do with all this extra energy? Well, guess what? It doesn't just sit on it and sit on the couch and watch TV. It takes the energy, the innate intelligence, and it drives it into healing things that needed healed years ago, but it just couldn't prioritize it, right? It had to survive. It had to do all these other things, deal with all this stuff going on. And, but now it has extra energy because it takes so much energy to digest and assimilate food. It has this bank of energy, and all of a sudden you get this back or knee pain or hip pain, shoulder pain that was an injury 20 years ago. But why? It's healing. The autophagy is occurring there. The stem cells are, healing. It's pretty remarkable, because when you get in stem cells injected, you actually have you have a decrease and then an increase in inflammation, because the body drives this healing process. We see that happen in a fast. Pretty cool. Anyway, so that's a big one. Also, we're changing the microbiome. The real way to fix a gut is through these fasting principles, and also these other principles that I'm going to walk you through 6 weeks here up to the fast. And you also reset your DNA. So you're going to reset DNA when you fast. Bad things get turned on from a toxic world and toxic living. Well, the best way to turn those bad guys off and turn good ones on, fasting. So a lot of benefits here. So how do we maximize the benefits? Week 1, and week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and then we're going to start the fast. And then week 7 is how to break the fast. So it is, in fact, a 7-week program. And that's what my book's about. All right. So let's go beyond the fast. Okay. So week 1 is let's get fat adapted. Yes, we're going to go into ketosis. Now, I'm not a believer in staying in one diet. I already made that very clear. I'm a believer in switching diets. But for this period of time, we want to be in ketosis. I'll make it very simple. You want to get your carbohydrates under 50 grams a day on average. And the carbohydrates, low carbohydrates, are going to force the cell to utilize fat for energy. Remember, sugar or fat, if we lower the sugar or the carbohydrates, it forces the cell to use fat. Some people may have to go 30 grams of carbs, and that's net carbs, meaning minus the fiber, and that's your carbs. And by the way, Google it. Get an app on how many carbs are in this and that. How many carbs are in a cup of blueberries? Okay, it's 20, let's say. Okay, minus the 10 grams of fiber, that's 10 net carbs that you add to your 50 that day. You want to stay under 50. Okay, if you go to my website, watch Cell Healing TV, put in ketosis, zillion things on ketosis. Go to free keto roadmap, and it'll give you all of the tips on how to get into ketosis. My 2-2-2 rule, because when you drop your carbs to help your hunger and the lightheadedness, because your glucose is plummeting and you're still not making ketones for your brain, you're making them, but your brain's not adapted yet. So you're not keto adapted. That means your brain can't use fat. It can only use sugar or these ketones. So what happens when you lower your carbs in this ketotic state, your body starts burning fat, and your cells in your body will start using fat eventually. We call that fat adaptation. But typically that takes at least 2 weeks for the average person. So in the meantime, especially the first week, you just kind of feel woozy. So the 2-2-2 rule is going to help you there. But let me make the point. So then once ketones start to, they're the byproduct of fat metabolism. So you break fat down and you make ketones, then your brain starts to use those. So we want to go in this fast, fat adapted and keto adapted. Why? We're going to get max autophagy day 1. Day 2, we're going to get max stem cells day 1, day 2, max energy diversion, max ketones, right? All those things that I said cause the healing, we're going to get them instead of day 4 or 5, we're going to get them day 1 and 2. Sounds good? Oh, and your fast will be a breeze. So that's why we're doing this. All right, so the 2-2-2 rule. 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or MCT oil, 2 tablespoons of grass-fed butter or ghee, 2 tablespoons of, say, olive oil, maybe avocado oil. You can see we're getting a variety of different fats, and then 2 teaspoons of sea salt. Why? Because something happens the first week. You dump glycogen, that stored sugar, out of your liver and muscles, and guess what? That makes you feel worse, and you lose electrolytes. So we want to take some sea salt in to maintain your potassium and your electrolytes, and it makes you feel better. So drink some warm sea salt if you're water fasting or partial fasting. Okay. And I promise you, I'm going to talk to you about your fasting options, a little bit more about those fasts. But regardless of what fast you're doing these steps. So we're going to do this first. So the 2-2-2 rule will help in this fat adaptation process. Okay, that's week 1 lesson. My book has all these recipes and all these cool little tricks and things. And my doctors that I train are doing this program actually around the country. They're doing it virtual. They're doing it live to audiences, and it's massively successful because people want to know this stuff. You know, the number 1 Googled word ketosis. Number 2, fasting. Well, it has it all, doesn't it? And that brings me to week 2. You've heard me talk a lot about intermittent fasting, right? Where we eat in a window. We go maybe 15 to 20 hours without food, and then we eat our meals in a window. Well, we're not going to do that until week 3. But here's what week 2 is, because most of your people are eating, according to studies, up to 17 to 21 meals a day, meaning each time you take a handful of something, kombucha, whatever it is, that's a meal. So imagine taking someone into eating, a couple meals in a window. Doesn't go over well. So we start here. Week 2 lesson, no snacks. That's it, no snacks. So just eat 3 meals a day. Don't eat anything else. No handful of nuts, no kombuchas, 3 snacks, that's it, or 3 meals, that's it. Believe me, that's hard for people. But what we're doing is we're getting the body used to using its own fat for energy instead of the food that you're constantly putting in your mouth. Listen, studies are clear. You want to live long, eat less. You want to live long, healthy, eat less. But you want to live you want to die early, eat more often. And by the way, when we say eat less, we don't want to eat less. We want to eat less often. That's really what ancient cultures did. They ate less often. I was in a tribe in Africa, and I saw them eat 1 3-hour meal a day. Astounding. I never saw that before. At that point, I was probably eating 5 6 meals a day myself, but they eat that 1 meal. Unhealthy people are constantly always putting food in their mouth because they have to. They get dizzy, they get symptoms, they get hangry, right? But once we go through this fat adaptation, once we add all these strategies, you will live longer. You will downregulate inflammation. You will feel better, but you're going to have to feel a little crappy before we get there. So that's why we're doing this training before we fast. All right. So that's week 2. Week 3, now we intermittent fast. Now we say, pick a window. I like to talk in terms of eating windows. So I like to say, pick an 8-hour window, maybe 10-hour window. If they're chronic eaters, let them pick their eating window and let them eat as many times as they want in the eating window, for goodness sakes. I just want to get a fast going, whether it's 15 hours, 18, 20 hours, whatever it is. And then each week I encourage them, and I encourage you to keep shrinking the window down. We want to stop this so we burn this. And bad cells don't adapt. We start putting this pressure on the mitochondria, and they start having to either wise up or bad cells don't adapt, and the body gets rid of them because we're forcing these cells to become better fat adaptation cells. I don't know, fat adapted, I guess. But going into ketosis, bringing carbs down below 50 is one way. But when we start going completely periods without food, that's a better way. So week 3 is, in fact, choosing your eating window, teaching people to eat a meal. Now, eventually, I'd prefer they eat just 2 meals in that window, but in the beginning, allow them to eat whatever they want. Now, again, if you go to my Facebook, dr.danielpompa, you can watch a lot of videos I've done on some of these principles, because I even teach how to do your glucose and ketones to make sure you're in ketosis, which is showing you're fat adapted. When you do a blood ketone above 0.5 means you're in ketosis. But one of the things we want to see in this fasting state is we want to see your glucose dropping and your ketones rising. So you take your glucose and ketones first thing in the morning, then you take it before you eat your first meal. And we want to see the glucose trending down and the ketones trending up. That's an indicator that you're burning fat as energy. The ketones are rising. Your brain's eventually going to love you and love the ketones. So that's a way to actually see if your window's working for you. For this, come to my seminar, because we train on that. We do that. And for a webcast, it's a little hard to actually demonstrate that. But you can easily go to getketomojo.com, and you can get one of those meters. Okay. At this point, what's going to happen is people are going to still start feeling bad and wondering why. Toxic is the reason. They start tapping into fat, and they start releasing toxins. Here come the supplement suggestions. Bind is magic for this. They need bind. absolutely it down regulates a lot of the toxins that they're just auto intoxicating, just from their liver to the bile back to the liver and systemic. Cytodetox, which works in and around the cells, is magic as well. ACX, my docs love. It also helps as a blood cleanser, keeping things moving, right? C colon, we want to keep that moving. L liver, okay, you see, these are some of the ones that we want to support. K kidney, we want to support those pathways. And MBC, neurobiotic, we want to support the gut as well. Liver, kidney, gut, right? MORS, you want to support methylation, right? Very, very important. VISTA, you want to support the cell membrane. Okay, ENRG, because the mitochondria, that's what we want healthier. We want more, that's where you burn fat. We want to support the healthy mitochondria, get rid of the bad ones. So VISTA, MORS, ENRG, those are the cellulars I recommend. For the toxic issues, bind and cyto detox, critical. ACX could be a benefit. SENG can keep the lymphatics open. Okay, so those are my favorites during this wind up to the fast. And then during the fast, if you were just water only, I would only do bind and cyto because they don't offer anything. And there's a product that I also use called Fast Tonic that's a molecular hydrogen. Those three products we call them the fasting trio. So that's it. But because we don't want to offer anything during a water fast. Now, a partial fast is different, okay, or fasting mimicking diet. So before we get into week 4, now let's examine our fasting options. So, let's do that. I'll do that once we get to the fast. So let's just go into week 4. This is my favorite, okay? Week 4, we are now fat adapted. We are dealing with toxins. And by the way, if you're not fat adapting or you're not losing weight, it's because of toxins. And therefore, I would do the whole TCD. I would just be on the whole TCD, which has a lot of the supplements I just mentioned. That's in the True Cellular Detox program, right? So I would just do that while you're going through this. Because again, people who struggle to get fat adapted, most often that's a toxic issue. Because the toxins make their way in and around even the healthy cells where the hormone receptors are, and it blunts them. And now your thyroid hormone is not working well, so you're not burning fat. Your leptin's not working well, so that affects fat burning. Insulin, you're storing fat. So all of those hormones get disrupted when you're releasing even more toxins, and it can just shut down weight loss and fat adaptation. So True Cellular Detox could be a huge benefit, but I named all of the supplements I like. All right, week 4 is my diet variation strategies. This is the real biohack of how we get fat adapted to go into this fast in maximum form, maximum fat adaptation shape, to get the maximum autophagy, the maximum stem cells, the maximum ketones, energy diversion, all of it. So this is the magic, because when you start getting into this low carb state, the cells are now using fat as its energy. There's not enough carbohydrates. So you know what it does? It says, okay, we better start holding on to this fat and burn less. And all of a sudden you start not getting fat, your numbers start lowering, or you start getting belly fat or thigh fat or butt fat. Fat are all the places you don't want fat, right? But your body wants to store it because all it wants to do is survive. It doesn't care about anything else. So it will start burning your muscle if it has to, but God forbid, because it turns the muscle into sugar, but God forbid it uses the fat because that's its fuel and it wants to survive and keep it. Let me give you an analogy. You can use this analogy with your patients. You're in a cabin up in the deep woods in Alaska. You have a wood stack to make it through the average winter, right? That's going to heat your cabin. That's your only source of energy, just like your body with fat, right? And this winter is a very harsh winter, more harsh than last. And you realize that your wood pile is dwindling much faster than you expected. So you're going to burn less wood or more? Of course you're going to burn less. Instead of keeping your cabin at 70, you're going to keep it at 50 or 60 just to survive the winter. That's what your body's doing. It's wanting to burn less fat. You want to burn less wood. But now you have a friend come along that checks on you and realizes you're out of wood. He happens to dump you off a whole new thing of wood. You're going to burn more or less now? you're going to start burning more again, right? You're going to fire it back up because you know you can survive the winter. Well, that's what a feast day does. So part of this diet variation is we add a feast day in. So I call this my 5-1-1. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a feast day in. I like mine on Saturdays. That's to remind the body it's not starving. And then we're going to add a famine day in. Feast famine cycling is the critical component of diet variation. So we add that feast day in, and that reminds our body it's not starving. Now the famine day is where we either just eat one meal that day or maybe no meals. You see what we're doing? Bad cells don't adapt. We're forcing our body to actually use its own fat for energy. We're preparing for the 5-day fast, right? So we're getting more and more fat adapted, right? We're forcing our brain to use ketones. We're forcing our body to use its fat for energy. So that's where the famine day comes in, and then the feast day. They don't have to be back to back. They could be if you want, but like say Wednesday, you do your famine day, eat one meal or no meal, and then Saturday, you do your feast day, right? 5-1-1, 5 days in ketosis, 1 day of feast, 1 day of famine. Now let's go to week 5. Week 5, pretty simple. We're going to take the stress a little more to the cell. We're going to exercise a little harder. We're going to go 4-2-1. We're going to add 2 fasting days. So it could be back to back. Sometimes mine are, but you could separate them. You could do Tuesday, Thursday, but you still keep your feast day in. 4-2-1. What are we doing here? We're taking it to the next level, right? We're getting our body even more used to utilizing its fat for energy when you're not eating. Some of you, if it's super easy at this point, hey, you could do a 3-3-1 where you actually do 3 fasting days. So we're taking that diet variation to the next level. Now it brings us to week 6. Here we are at the fast. Now let's choose your fast. If this is your first one, I recommend either the fasting mimicking diet or a partial fast. Okay, what is that? Okay, let's start with what a partial fast is. A partial fast is taking your calories between 500 and 1,000 per day, depending on your body size. So 150 and less, stick around the 500, max 800. If you get up to around the 200, you could be 200 mark. You could be right around the 1,000 calorie mark. But that's your caloric intake. Very important because low calories stimulates that autophagy that I spoke about. But there's another important component: protein. You have to drop, if you're a bigger person, drop your protein below 20. If you're a smaller person, below 15. Why? Because protein will also stop autophagy. So we need the low protein. So on the partial fast, I like to lean towards fats because fats don't punish you, right? We still want to keep our carbohydrates below 50, but that's easy because you're eating so few calories. But you're going to gravitate towards fats, oils, things like avocados are great. You can have some berries, but as long as you watch the calories and the protein, therein lies the magic. So those are the 2 rules. Okay. In the past, when I've done partial fasting, it's harder for me than water fasting. And by the way, if people are on medication, man, they better work with their doctor because they're going to need a lot less. So warning, supervised, especially water fasting, especially people with insulin, metabolic, diabetics, watch their meds. They will need less. Okay, so when I did these partial fasts, once I would start eating, I was hard for me to kind of stop. So for me, water fasting, when you go into it doing what I'm teaching you, I lose my hunger. The first day I'm hungry around when I usually eat my lunch or dinner. So, 4 o'clock, I'm hungry, passes through it in 10 minutes, no big deal. Day 2, maybe a little bit of that, but very little at all. Day 3, nothing, and I'm not hungry at all. But when I'm eating little bits, I get hungry again as soon as I start eating. It was a little more problematic for me. By the way, studies show that these partial fasts still create the autophagy as long as you follow these rules. So for a lot of people beginning, it's much easier, especially metabolically for people. They don't get the really low glucose level, but they still get the autophagy. But the fasting mimicking diet, Walter Longo came up with a great idea, him and his team. It's called Prolong. And you can actually go to my website and get these kits, but it's a box of food, and you have this box of food for the day. Last fast I did this, and it was so much easier because it was simple foods to eat, but it was like, this is what I get. And I knew that psychologically, and it was so much easier than when I created my own partial fast. So Walter Longo's studies on this, I don't have time to get into them, but I mean, just miraculous, showing the autophagy, showing the stem cell rise, and you still get to eat some food. It's a really good place to start. And like I said, the food is good, and it just, when to stop. So very, very innovative and very effective on one of his studies. Now, this wasn't a study done with his box food. This was a different study on animals, on rats, but it proves the point. They basically emulated one of these partial fasts, right? And they did it 5 weeks, might have been 4 weeks. I can't recall right now. But anyways, so they did 5 days, 4 weeks. It was 4 weeks in a row. And into this partial fast, type 1 diabetic rats, guess what happened? Their beta cells basically came alive again. And what they think happened is there was beta cell stem cells up in where right where the inlet is, the pancreatic duct. And what happened is the stem cells migrated down, and true to fasting, the stem cells rose up and it created new beta cells. So literally, they're actually doing this study in humans right now with type 1 diabetic humans with these Prolong fasting mimicking diet boxes of food. And they're doing it consecutive months. Look, you're going to hear me say this. One fast isn't always the answer. You don't heal with one fast. You want this to be a part of who you are. I do probably 3 fasts a year. If you're very healthy, even one fast a year can transform your health. According to Thomas Seyfried, who wrote the book Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, brilliant cancer researcher, he said you can reduce your cancer risk by 90 to 95% just doing one fast a year. So 5 days is the magic. One a year will benefit you, but more with each fast, you get healthier and healthier. So oftentimes we are doing a fasting mimicking diet or a partial fast one time a month with people. We'll throw in some various water fasts along the way as well. Sometimes it's every other month. Sometimes it's one a quarter. But these principles we're applying, the diet variation that I was talking about, obviously the intermittent fasting and the ketosis, we're applying the whole time while we're going through these fasting periods. Our DNA is set up for this. Humans, we don't do it anymore, but it resets our DNA, our microbiome, and we get all these healing benefits. It's magic. All right, so what about broth fasting? I think it's okay. It's probably more in line with a partial fast. The good thing about broth is you have your electrolytes, a lot of them in the broth. Adding some sea salt to that makes it magic. I personally, by day 2 or 3, can't stand the broth anymore, and I end up evolving to just water. So, but it's still worth doing. Not a fan of juice fasting because raised up glucose shuts down autophagy. Not a fan. So broth, no problem. Broth with fat, no problem. As long as you stay within the calories and the protein. So don't eat the meat off the bone. You're going to keep the rules that we need to keep the autophagy going. So those are your fasting choices. And my favorite is, I still love good old water fasting, and the oldest of all the fasts, obviously. But again, for beginners, I think the fasting mimicking diet is fantastic. And again, go to my website if you want to get the boxes for that. And we even have a deal for the doctors. So just call Revelation Health, my website, and they can help you with that. So you get some type of deal there. But anyway, how do you break a fast? This is week 7. So that was week 6, the fast. Week 7 is you break the fast by refeeding your gut, unless you have SIBO, which is the past webcast that we did. But you want to feed your good bacteria, because during a fast, you starve down all bacteria, good and bad, which is really great. And then we have an opportunity to raise up the good. So eating starting the food with lower calories. I break a water fast with a partial fast or the fasting mimicking diet. We want lower calories for at least 2 days, 500 to 1,000 calories for the first 2 days after a fast. Very important. your stomach acid's low, your enzymes are low, you cannot throw a bunch of food down. You will screw up your fast. Warning, warning, warning. So don't do that. We don't eat meat for the first 2 days because we want our HCl to come back up. So we wait 2 days before we add meat back in. Eggs, you can add back in day 2, but meat, day 3, add back in. Restricted calories for the first 2 days, 500 to 1,000. 500 maybe the first day, 5 to 8, and then 8 to 1,000 the second day. So work your calories up. And then you want your fermented foods, some light fermented vegetables, blended vegetables. Day 1, don't eat salad. Raw vegetables, no good for at least those first 2 days. Cook them, steam them. It makes it easier to digest, or at least blend them. So start. Berries are great. Some soft fruits, avocados, fantastic. So watch, oils are good, but not too much. Stay within the calories. Okay, so that is, and then MBC, you want to start your MBC, a neurobiotic. You want to start your bacterias in when you break the fast. This is a great opportunity to reseed when you have the bad guys starved down. Now we can reseed with these new ones. So break it slow, please break it slow. And again, in my new book, we have all these foods and all the rules and everything to follow. Well, look for it. Look for the book, Beyond Fasting, because this takes you far beyond just fasting, that's for sure. This is everything that I've learned in many, many years. And you add the cellular detox to this, well, you have something that nobody's doing. And all of the scientific literature supports this is the key, really, to dealing with the neurodegenerative diseases, the autoimmune, the hormone challenges, all of it that we're facing today, like no time other, ever in the history of man. But it's not as easy as it was just, here's some dietary changes and some supplements, if it were only so easy. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next webcast, I am sure. Dr. Pompa, signing out.